almost there. 22nd of August, the 15th BRICS Summit, going to be hosted here in Johannesburg, just down the road from where we are in Sandton. So leaders of emerging markets, developing countries, all going to be gathering to talk about the economies within the bloc. Of course, to remind you, the acronym, it's BRICS. It's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and of course, South Africa as well. One of those countries which is going to be key in all of the discussions is going to be India. And I have with me this morning, what a pleasure it is to have. It's here in South Africa this morning, ahead of the BRICS Summit. It is Dammu Ravi, Secretary of Economic Relations in India's Ministry of External Affairs. And Secretary, good morning, and good to have you on eNCA. Welcome.
Good morning, Gareth, and good morning, South Africa.
It's going to be a very exciting few days. Keen interest, of course, all the big decisions to be made. But I would like to start here, Secretary, if I may. What's India's hope and expectation at the end of BRICS? What would you like to get out of this?
Well, Gareth, thank you for having me here first. But at outset, first let me congratulate South Africa for its excellent, brilliant chairship of the BRICS. And all these months, there have been extraordinary events, meetings that have taken place. And also, it's important to recognize the fact that the leaders and the experts are meeting after 3 years of having gone virtual. Now it's going to be in physical format.
That's right.
We're really happy to be here today. And also our Prime Minister will be here a couple of days from now. We are committed to the successful outcome of the summit under the leadership of President Cyril Ramaphosa. A lot of effort has gone into it, and we believe that there's a lot to achieve. BRICS is a platform for emerging economies and developing countries, and we believe that the narrative that is being built under the leadership of South Africa will set the tone for the global narratives on the development. So there are a lot of issues that are being discussed, going to be discussed during this summit.
What's the standout issue for India? What would you like to see addressed? What's urgent for you and your Prime Minister?
Well, you also need to understand that we are having the presidency of the G20 today. And this year has been quite extraordinary effort for our point of view. And very soon we will also be having the summit. But we believe that the narrative being built in the BRICS will find some kind of synergies in the G20, and the outcomes, successful outcomes here will build into the G20 convergence, and that's very important, the leadership of South Africa here. And one important thing for all the leaders will be the expansion of BRICS. I think in the changing times and the dynamics of the 21st century will demand for an expansion, and that being recognized by all leaders. So that discussion is going to take place.
India in favor of the expansion?
Of course. I think we've right at the beginning said that expansion is a very natural thing here, given the dynamics of the world, changing world. So, but the criteria and the guidelines are being discussed, and how to go forward from now onwards is the main thing. So I think during the chairship of South Africa, that the deliberations have taken place quite extensively, and we're going to see forward movement from now onwards.
Right, let's talk trade as well, because certainly a very long history, Secretary, between Africa and India, but also South Africa, of course, and India. Where do we try and improve that relation between our two countries? A lot gets done on trade and commerce, but I'm sure we can all get better at this. What would you like to see change?
Yes, I think it's a very good question, Gareth. Thanks for asking me that. I think our bilateral trade is just about $18 billion, and it's evenly poised at this point of time. But we also need to recognize that we need to go beyond the traditional way of doing business. I think the one most important thing is beyond commodities, we have to go into value addition. I think that's fitting into the larger vision of Africa itself, which is the Agenda 2063, industrialization, Africa-wide free continent agreements. And these are very important instruments which we are looking very carefully. I think limitations of hard currencies we'll have to overcome by encouraging our countries to do more in local currencies, trading, and see how we can finance trade mechanisms, trade between the two countries.
Because local currency mechanism is also very important when you're talking about intra-continental and intercontinental trade, because I understand as well, and please correct me if I have my understanding incorrect on this one, a historic move to drop the dollar, rather use the rupee in trade deals with the UAE. I mean, that's one step to what you're talking about.
Well, I wouldn't say that we would like to drop the hard currency like the dollar or the euro, but I think we have to recognize that as countries grow and their aspirations grow, we have to be innovative. And that's where it comes. Our Prime Minister said that, we should encourage to do more of Indian rupee trading. And we have already entered into bilateral agreements between the banks of the countries. 22 arrangements have already been entered into. So we are slowly doing it. We will gradually build that momentum, and I believe this is a great opportunity to do with Africa, because bilateral trade with Africa, India-Africa, is about $98 billion, and investments around 75, 76. But that's not enough. We're still scratching the surface in terms of potential. So I believe we need to overcome the limitations of doing trade in terms of the currency usage and trade financing mechanism with greater number of countries in Africa.
Where does India view itself? I want to use not a ranking per se within BRICS. I know you're going to tell me all countries are equal within BRICS, but to be fair, we're not. For example, South Africa's economy compared to India, compared to China, compared to Russia, very, very different. Where does India see itself sitting within BRICS at the moment? Is there a lot of upward management, downward management between yourselves and the other countries? Where do you think you are in the rankings per se in BRICS?
Well, I don't want to go into setting a ranking in the BRICS, but I think what we need to recognize is it's a great platform for emerging economies and developing countries to be able to deliberate on global issues. And I think post-COVID, we need to focus on the economic recovery, and that requires all the countries to working together. So we are also talking about the currency being used among the BRIC countries, but we also understand that if you have to really trigger trade economic cooperation, then we have to be a lot more aggressive and a lot more active on that field. So one of which is, trade. The trade facilitation issues, how BRICS countries can work together to eliminate some of the market access barriers that are there. And so we have to think about generating greater coordination of our trade policies and economic policies, cooperation. Already there is a roadmap for economic cooperation, but there are a lot of instruments that have been discussed under that. We need to get them to implement. I think we have lost a lot of time because of COVID. It is time for us to recover from that.
Yeah, so it's the time now, I think, to accelerate everything you've lost over the last 3 years. Lots of talking, as you say, implementation, though, Secretary, is important. I want to get a sense as well, because the reason I asked about the ranking, I know there isn't a ranking, but many critics of BRICS aimed at South Africa, and I'd like your perspective on this, is that South Africa is at the bottom of the totem pole, and really other countries in BRICS gain a lot more from South Africa than we as a country gain from BRICS. Well, that's some of the criticism. What's your take?
Gareth, I don't think I like to see it from that point of view. I think South Africa has tremendous potential, and it's not that someone is going to gain more and others are going to gain less. And in this context, South Africa is very well positioned. I think cooperation will lead to an opening up of our economies among the big countries, and that's what we need to look at. Trade, investment, e-commerce. Now we are looking at digital platforms that will enable greater acceleration. So it's always a cooperation that will lead to new avenues for growth. So from that point of view, South Africa is very well positioned. Look at your own natural resources, they're very strong. Even in technology, I think investments in India from South Africa are actually in the technology space, whereas we are invested in mostly in the commodity space. So I see there is a scope, but we need to be innovatively looking at taking out this potential. But I think in the 21st century, technology is going to dominate economies, and India has brought in this big public digital goods and digital infrastructure, some of the successful solutions that we have introduced through this platform. I believe there's a lot of scope for India and South Africa to work in this in 21st century on many of these ideas.
As I say goodbye to you, Secretary, as well, I want to get your thoughts. I want to circle back to the expansion, because I think that's going to be one of the big talking points. The applications for more countries. Is it 22, 23 applications? 22. As India, which of those applications would be of most interest to you? I imagine most beneficial to get into the bloc. Is there one country that stands out?
Well, I know there are lots of countries have expressed interest. I mean, in fact, that 22 countries themselves have lined up to become members of BRICS itself shows that BRICS has some value. I don't like to take any names, but definitely we need to understand that there is a common understanding that those countries that will come in will strengthen BRICS processes and will add to the BRICS processes. And then there are certain set of criteria and the guidelines which they'll have to adhere to, which is actually the multilateral institutions to be revived, the UN Security Council expansion issues. These are very urgent. And the WTO reform, I think that's another very important for the trade to grow up. So there is a understanding here, but the countries that the members want to come in, there is no difference of opinion on that. But how to take them forward is an issue. You know, and there is also that new members would like to come in have to understand what the BRICS is all about. What are the commitments already made and whether they will be able to absorb and adopt them. So that's a process. So there are a set of countries. Each of the member countries have put in a list, about 4 or 5. It will set around in that way, but we have to set the process going to be able to take them in.
I suppose geographically as well, Secretary, as I say thank you to you, South Africa, we're going to be interested in countries, of course, like Algeria. We're going to be looking at Egypt, Ethiopia, all the countries from this continent. I mean, it would be fair to say India's going to look at its geographical neighbours, Russia, etc. That's a fair way to diagnose this, isn't it?
Geographical balance is very important in the representation of the BRICS as it goes forward.
Absolutely. And Secretary, thank you very much for coming in. All the best for BRICS. I certainly hope you and I can talk again. What's going to be a very, very interesting 15th BRICS Summit. My huge thanks for making time. They're very busy, all of those delegates involved with BRICS, and it's very kind of Dammu Ravi, Secretary of Economic Relations in India's Ministry of External Affairs, to make time on a Saturday morning to come and sit with me and talk about that. My biggest thanks to Dammu Ravi.